Welcome back, folks. Carl here from StoreHero. You've spent the last couple of weeks listening to myself and my co-founder Thomas Gleason do deeper dives in the world of profit-focused e-commerce, whether it's looking at individual stores who have ultimately gone through the StoreHero process, looking at potentially general e-commerce trends, and potentially helping people forecast for 2024. Now, this is a part, I suppose, of a series of different episodes we're going to be doing with James, the co-founder of OYL Coffee. Really interesting story. James has a really extensive background in coffee, built Dublin Barista School, one of the largest training centres for baristas across Ireland, and in doing so ultimately has not only developed an expertise in the space, but has really set himself up to launch OYL in the last couple of months. In this episode, you're going to hear a deep dive on ultimately the origin stories of OYL, and most importantly, you're actually going to see under the hood what are I suppose, behind the scenes conversations that are happening in a brand like OYL in terms of getting to that kind of profit focused journey. And that's a critical piece. This isn't a story spoken from the finish lines. James is very much on this journey and learning in a much more of a raw way what the daily and weekly challenges are. I think are going to be really beneficial over the next couple of months. So use this as a primer. We'll definitely hear a lot more from James, and let us know if you have any questions. We hope you like it. Right, well, James, really appreciate taking the time. Thanks for sitting down.
Carl, always a pleasure.
It's this is one of many conversations we've had over the last couple of months, so it's good to maybe flip the script a little bit, have an opportunity to record it, and hopefully give other people some value around these kind of early stage inner workings of an e-commerce business, as it's a lot easier to kind of put it in perspective. Maybe just to kick things off, it'd be great to get a little bit of a background on what OYL is and what products you're focusing on.
Absolutely. So OYL is a medicinal mushroom coffee business. It's direct to consumer on Shopify and Amazon. The business itself and the operations itself is for the vast majority outsourced. That was the business model that we wanted to create, whereas the manufacturing is outsourced, the logistics is outsourced. So we have everything for us is manufactured now in the UK. This is now we are 2 years in, and we were manufacturing in mainland Europe, and we'll go through the conversation about our product changes and everything. So everything is manufactured and shipped from the UK, but operated from Dublin in Ireland. About 90% of our business right now is in the UK as well. We want to keep on growing that, whilst also kind of growing into the Irish market. So that's the very basic element of it. I suppose the product itself is the one that we're launching with now in December 2023 is going to be a ground coffee version that has medicinal mushrooms blended in with it. So you can make this coffee at home in your cafetiere, V60, French press, AeroPress, Chemex, whichever filter method you have at home. You'll be able to make that coffee at home in any of those breweries. We're just targeting that.
Great, yeah. Makes sense. Yeah, I think it's obviously a sector that's changed quite a lot over the last couple of years, and as it's always beneficial for maybe some of us in smaller markets like Ireland or the UK, the likes of the US often paint a picture as to what the future looks like for us in terms of purchase behavior, customer trends, and obviously the kind of trend of taking the functional benefits of mushrooms has been something that people in the US have maybe started to see over the last couple of years, but people often have had to make the sacrifice of replacing their morning coffee with a mushroom-based product. And I suppose the key thing that stood out to me is OYL can ultimately combine both.
Yeah, look, we were taking inspiration from the US, Four Sigmatic, which is the kind of the founders of the mushroom coffee sector, I suppose. From Scandinavia, they went to the US, and then and more recently, they were around 2012. And then more recently, we have Mudwater, which is actually a coffee alternative, they call it, but they're seeing since 2018 huge growth, and that's passed over to Ireland and to the UK, where you'll have a number of brands popping up offering mushroom coffee. And I think where we fit within this space is to make the medicinal mushrooms more accessible and to add into your daily routine. We do that through coffee. I personally have a career in coffee, and that's where my interest was kind of peaked. I've also got a huge personal interest in personal development and longevity and health and all that side of things. Um, so after tasting a lot of the products in the market, the realization for me was that the the products on the market were really, really poor quality. Not necessarily the mushrooms themselves, but actually the coffee that we were using as the kind of the conduit for the mushrooms was terrible. So I was shocked and disappointed, and also happy by how bad they were. So that's where the kind of the ideation came from. That I knew that we could make a product that tasted really, really good, whilst also having the benefits of high quality kind of mushrooms in there as well.
It's an interesting, such an interesting space, and I think the critical piece that anybody from any industry can, and any kind of e-commerce sector can take from this is starting with a unique proposition, and a proposition in which you can really differentiate yourself is the first step that will make everything a lot easier into the future. If it's a case where you're operating in a really, really commoditized space, it means that everything has to be absolutely operationally excellent in order for the business to work, because it's so competitive. Whereas if you can act as that kind of define that point of differentiation, you know, as every business owner and entrepreneur and e-commerce store owner can expect, it's going to be a lot of work either way, but it sets your foundations up to be a little bit stronger. So even to maybe just to kind of dive into your background a little bit, ultimately you're not new to the coffee sector. Maybe you can give some context on how that kind of industry expertise overlaid with those kind of own personal health interest, and maybe a couple of maybe key milestones that really maybe made you change your tune a little bit from a health perspective.
Yeah, so for the last 14 years, I've operated a company called Dublin Barista School. So we were in the education side of coffee, but also the cafe side of coffee, and we have done coffee roasting side of things as well. So we've trained almost 100,000 people kind of in Ireland to become baristas and to travel the world and get jobs all around the world, Ireland and abroad. We have also set up a company in Abu Dhabi and Dubai that does the same. So we brought the education market to the Middle East, which has got huge coffee demand as well. And I think the the experience that I've gained over the last 14 or so years has been very important to starting this business. And it's much easier when you know. I suppose there's two things. I know a lot about coffee, but I don't know a lot about e-commerce and direct consumer. So that's a separate kind of side of things. Um, from 2016 to 2020, we roasted coffee. So we got heavily involved in sourcing coffee, becoming sensory experts, understanding the difference between defective coffee and high quality coffee, understanding the difference between specialty grade coffee and sub-commercial grade coffee, and everything in between. So it was a really interesting learning curve for us as a company as we sourced coffee from around the world. We understood the commodity markets very well. We understood the price per kilo very well, and we understood how to get really great coffee at a very competitive price, which is kind of the important aspect of getting good margin um, when you bring it down to a business level. Um, Regarding the kind of health side of things, from 2009, when I first started my first company, to about 2015, I had three companies during that period, and I went hell for leather as an entrepreneur. And as what's a common trait with entrepreneurs, we don't like to sit still. We like to run around the place and juggle and start loads of things, and hopefully one of them sticks. And from 2009 to 2015, I started three companies. One was a sandwich catering company. One was a Mexican burrito chain that we got up to two. We called it a chain, but it was two locations. And Dublin Barista School, which was still the business that I have today. But what happened to me on a personal level was that I had to liquidate two of those companies in 2015, and became a very difficult period for me on an emotional level, trying to deal with all of that stress and anxiety and everything. And I didn't know how to deal with it on a personal level, so I kind of turned to alcohol, which was my only friend at the time. And bad food, and just kind of went down into a very kind of dark kind of space for a couple of years until in about 2017 I woke up out of that, and I realized that something had to change on a health perspective, because I woke up 125 kilos. I was considered obese. My bloods, when I did get them done a few years later, showed that I was really unhealthy and in a bad space. Um, Metabolically, I was at the age of a 70-year-old man. I was only in my 30s. So wasn't in a great kind of mental space or physical space, and I decided to kind of go on a 180-degree change. Gave up alcohol, started eating healthy, went down the biohacking kind of rabbit hole, if you will. And I just started putting loads of things into my coffee, aside from the obvious things about getting fit and healthy, which I did. I ran marathons, I ran ultra marathons. I got up to an 80-kilometer mountain run. I did in 2020. So I went from one extreme to being extremely unhealthy to the opposite of being extremely inverted commas healthy. But it was one imbalance to the other. But I went down this kind of health rabbit hole where I was getting bloods, I was getting IVs, I was getting NAD, uh, uh, IVs. I was adding just loads of stuff to my coffee, just experimenting from any types of vitamins to um, MCT oils to collagen, whatever it was I thought was going to help me benefit and perform a little bit better on a daily basis. I put it into my coffee, and that's what I was doing before I started this business. And then I started down the mushroom side of things, testing it out of interest more than anything. I started putting them in my food, the mushrooms themselves initially, and then I started adding them into my coffee. And then when COVID came and all our businesses were shut down, yeah, I was asking myself a real question: what am I going to do next? What's viable to do in this market? And obviously, e-commerce was going crazy, and direct to consumer was going crazy, and it offered me some time to sit back and think about what product I would like to build, and this is what I created. I love coffee, number one, and I love health, and marrying those two things together were just a perfect fit for me. I knew I could make a better product that was out there in the market, which we have proven. We just won a Great Taste Award. So we've hit that milestone of
Yes.
creating a really good product that tastes great. Um, and I know how to source coffee, really good, high quality coffee at the right price. I know how to buy it, I know where to buy it. I know I'm a sensory expert and know how it should taste. Not That's not saying that the general marketplace will have the same taste profiles that I love, but on a general, we produce a coffee that's really well balanced, sweet, chocolatey flavors that just enjoyable to drink. It's specialty grade, so it's very high end in quality. Um, and we source the best quality mushroom extract as well. So I sourced, and it took me a long time to find the right supplier, but it was important to me that we had the best quality in terms of it's organic, it's actually picked at farm level, and it's brought and processed by the same company. And then we're receiving it and we're blending it with our coffee, all in small batches at the moment, just to keep it as fresh and as high quality as possible. Obviously, when we get to scale, I think from a logistical perspective as well, it was important for me to look ahead and say, okay, well, it's going to be easy for us to sell 50 bags, but what happens when we have to sell 5,000 bags or 50,000 bags? Are we able to do that? And we have it. Our setup now allows us to be able to turn that up very quickly when we need to. And
Interesting.
yeah,
It's to kind of expand on that as well. Like it's the practical benefit I think here that a lot of people should really take from this is all that knowledge and expertise in the sector has meant that you've built some really solid underlying unit economics. So ultimately, you're operating from a space whereby, ultimately we don't need absolutely everything to be perfect if it's a case where we have that model correctly. Some people operate on such a thin margin to the extent that they don't really have any room to test and experiment, and ultimately, with that in mind, can often feel like they're hitting a ceiling. So obviously, over the last 12 months, you've been doing a lot of that testing and experimentation. Maybe just to take a couple of kind of key components of the business. We have the brand and product messaging there, which I think is very easy to see. You're operating in an industry whereby, in a fast growing industry, so that market is increasing in size. One of the first pieces that kind of stood out to me in our conversations is over the last number of months, you've really reframed the product offering previously between a series of products, both in terms of bags of coffee and pods. What were the takeaways there that kind of led you to really streamline that in the last couple of weeks?
Well, the practical takeaways from a business operator is that the original product that I was making for myself was ground, high-end ground coffee with mushrooms. I was making it at my house. And then when we were looking at all our manufacturing options and the different modalities, such as, okay, what are we going to offer our customer? Okay, who is our customer number one? What are we going to offer them? And one of our manufacturers at the time really sold us on the pod idea that it was fast growing, and that we would be the only ones in the world offering medicinal mushroom specialty coffee in pods, which we were. So we went with that, and that was actually our first SKU that we went with. And only through time did really the understanding of the pod market come out to us. Like, I mean, there is like about 10 million machines sold in the UK. So we knew there was a huge market for it. But what I didn't realize was that Nespresso machines are old, they're new, and the older machines don't extract the coffee the same way as the new machines. The new machines do a really, really good job. So the coffee actually tastes really, really good. But if you take a 5-year-old machine or a 10-year-old machine, and a lot of people have those older machines, the coffee comes and tastes completely different, and it tastes very, very bitter and tastes very, very more negative. So we started getting some negative reviews on Amazon, because that was actually our first platform that we launched on. And I was really taken aback by the negative reviews. And it was only when I started experimenting myself with between old and new machines that I see the difference, and I understood where the customer was coming from, because they were right. It did taste not the way I wanted it to. And sales were slow on the pod. Then we launched the ground coffee version. So, just to give some context to people listening, that we launched the brand 2 years ago on a pre-seed investment. So we got venture capital investment, and we invested a lot in the website, and we invested a lot in the brand. And the problem and the learning from that side of it is that we went through a lot of different agencies, and we didn't really know what we were doing on a personal and business level, because we wanted to create a high-end brand, we wanted to create a high-end website. And 3 iterations of the website later, with 3 different agencies, had cost us an arm and a leg. Although they created a beautiful brand and everything, there was just a lot of money spent on that creation. And to be honest with you, I probably would have been better just doing it myself at that stage, and saving the money. I think we may cut out there a little bit.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'd say we built the website 3 times over a year. The reality was I probably was studying better doing it myself. We're going in and out. So
Yep.
the pre-seed stage of the business was really just building the foundation and testing the ads and going through a test phase really. And then we essentially ran out of money, if the honest answer is. In this summer we ran short of money after investing money in advertising, and we were advertising for about 4 months. We weren't getting the results that we wanted. We were tracking mostly ROAS as our KPI, and we were doing poorly. And again, it was like putting my business in the hands of other people and not really understanding what was fully happening. And I think I'll take that on to the next level now as we're going through in a much more level-headed way, when we're tracking more realistic KPIs in the business. And that's obviously where your expertise will come in. But the
Yeah,
second, so
it
just before I finish, and that one,
yeah, yeah.
just so where we
Please do.
are now in December 2023 is that we've basically taken, we had 6 SKUs, and now we've reduced them all down to 1 SKU, and we've created like a super um, product, if you want to call it that, where it's our ground coffee version with the mix of three different mushrooms. We've upped the dose of mushrooms, and we've created kind of what I believe is the drink that I would have started with initially if I wasn't kind of brought down a different path. So, but there was a lot of all brilliant learnings in the last 2 years, and we're still standing and we're still in business. We have a brilliant brand, and we've got, more importantly, we have a brilliant product, and we've also got brilliant margins, which is
That
where we
definitely
could be going.
helps. And yeah, it's so many interesting pieces to jump off from that. I think it's such a common challenge that a lot of people have, where ultimately you're in this position where you're taking an expertise, bringing it into a new space. You need that additional help, external help. But I think sometimes the takeaway I would have is sometimes agencies or whether designers or whatever, kind of all those different stakeholders you rely on, they're good at what they do, but oftentimes there's a different matchup when somebody, a service provider of any type, is working with an established business with product market fit versus pre-product market fit stage. And where you're pre-product market fit, you kind of need to be a little more testing, more testing and experimentation, more focus as the actual product name suggests, whereby you're doing, you know, people often maybe confuse a minimum viable product with like a half-baked version of of something, whereas in reality, a good minimum viable product is actually just taking one component of that bigger product, still do it to a really great extent, but just not trying to take over the world overnight. So one thing that we've been working through over the last couple of weeks is really figuring out, okay, now that we have that refined product, what does that mean in terms of the actual business model? So naturally, with any sort of within the space, along with some similar spaces, you have the luxury there of building a habit. Now that comes with pros and cons. It's a higher bar in order to kind of work into somebody's routine, but once you're there and you're delivering value, more importantly, it that customer is worth more than a single transaction. And when we did an initial analysis on using StoreHero, one thing we saw is, okay, we were driving sales at an average order value of around £30, but realistically it was costing us £80 to get that conversion. Realistically, that might be okay if it's a case where you're going to recoup that investment very quickly and you have the cash flow in order to support that gap. But one thing we've really focused on over the last couple of weeks is saying, okay, well, let's really incentivize somebody to get on that subscription component, give them a discount as compared to a once-off purchase. Let's get it into their routine, and therefore, even if we're paying the same cost per acquisition, we're willing to do so because we know they'll be back. I think any other takeaways you found from an agency side around the ads? I know that's, as you said before, you've gone through a couple of iterations of that, and do you think it's right to say it was potentially maybe the marketing plan was maybe built for a post product market fit business, or was there anything else that you think stood out?
Yeah, but without having the expertise myself and learning kind of as I went along, it just felt like there was a bit of a disconnect, definitely, between the agency and what we were doing. And they were trying to fit us into their um, framework, I suppose. And maybe that's not the way it should have been. Maybe they should have built a framework around what we were doing. Um, but like it was, I think for 3 or 4 months, it was just a consistent kind of there wasn't much iteration on the, if I look back now, there wasn't much change in the actual ad design or the messaging of the ads, to say, okay, who is our avatar? Who is exactly the person who may be buying this? Because we never actually figured that out. Like after 4 months,
Hmm.
we still didn't really know, okay, who is the actual person buying this? I could tell you anecdotally who they are, but we didn't have it defined. This is the guy and girl who's buying our product, and we're going to go hard at them now. It was like, oh, we're still testing, and then every week we're still testing, and then we're still testing, and then this testing phase just kept on running and running and running. And was the idea was that we're going to put a little behind a lot of different variations, but I found
Sure.
there wasn't much variation, and the we never really got to the crux, and we never went all in on one specific area. And maybe that's not the way we should be doing it either, but that's what was making sense to me. And right, and we were losing money hand over fist because we were in a negative ROAS position. We were paying huge agency fees, and we were making sales. All right, that's great. The top end line was looking positive, but the bottom line wasn't. And I think when we first really had the conversation, it was like we need to be profitable after the second order, ideally even the first order if we can get there. And I think that's where our conversation led us to the single SKU, and the different kind of pricing model that we have now, which is gearing people into that subscription model. It's offering a starter pack that's really, really enticing. Um, and it's for, like, this product is for coffee lovers and people who are into their health. So it's kind of the perfect mix for those people who are going to get a V60 brewer on their starter pack for free, essentially. Um, and as we're offering it essentially
It's
for
so
free,
important.
and we're taking that hit on the margin on that first order. But then on the second orders, we're getting it back. So if our first order margin is 49%, then our second order margin is 64%, and it goes from there, which gets into much more kind of positive areas. Um, and
Definitely. I think jump in on that. Like, I think what that has ultimately done is de-risked. It's shifted the model whereby everyone is really fighting to get their cost per acquisition down and get their ROAS up as much as possible on that first purchase. But potentially, if that's not the best way to do it, how do we make the business model work so that we can afford a £50 CPA or a £60 CPA is a much more realistic way of looking at the world. Like, if that's the kind of market rate to actually drive a purchase of a specific price from a customer, how can we build a business model around that? So I think that's so important. I suppose even between all those pieces, we're stacking on top, a more defined product offering, a clear story, and differentiation in a growing market. We have a clear entry point to the brand in terms of the starter kit, and then I suppose from there as well. One big piece, I suppose, that I would guess that customers can see the benefit of through their subscription side is, um, the creating content then becomes a lot easier because ultimately you know who your ICP is. They're into the rhythm of things. You don't have to try to appeal to everyone. Send every message to every type of person, which is a big component as well. I think from your side, how are you thinking about the retention and maybe referral piece? It's this audience of kind of professionals, people who are interested in their health. They're busy people. They want to maybe get more out of their current routine. They're more diligent to look twice at maybe particular habits and routines in their life. Um, the expectation will be that there's a potential word of mouth component from that as well.
I think we what we're going to do is obviously utilize email marketing, um, to keep people educated. I think on the evergreen side of that, like, just create as much educational content around the mushrooms and how you can implement it into your lives. And obviously, that's a whole um, different planning, uh, content planning, but using email marketing, SMS, I think will play a big part once you start developing. Um, and yeah, like, I mean, this is like something that we want people could be talking about, obviously. So we're actually going to invest in a lot of influencer campaigns. If that's for that to go down that route, but um, using influencers and using UGC to talk about a product online, I think will be an important aspect of what we're going to be doing next year.
I think so. I think, again, it's all getting to a place where we're, again, learning from those lessons around, keeping a strong brand, but not making sure we don't dilute a sense of personality through it as well. And it's always, again, a seesaw between a number of different elements. Any business owner and any store owner is balancing a number of different priorities there. But again, it's getting those fundamentals in place to give ourselves an opportunity to succeed. I think one other takeaway that I'd kind of highlight for anyone listening as well is making sure that you can kind of test in isolation. If it's a case where you're testing the merits of your product as well as testing your marketing, it's hard to know what's a product issue, what's a brand issue, what's a marketing issue, what's a channel issue. So, stacking them maybe one step, one on top of another, and maybe only adding components in, keeping it really simple, in order to kind of control those variables a bit more. I think this is going to be really interesting over time as we maybe check in, see how things are going, and ultimately understand what those other metrics look like. Any other takeaways before we finish up around learnings over the last kind of 12 to 24 months? You touched on there a real focus around maybe a profit orientation rather than a revenue orientation. That's obviously an area a lot of people get stuck in, and it shifts the dynamic for the business to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think overall, I mean, it's the product itself. We had too many products at the beginning where it was too wide of an audience, really, because we were trying to differentiate between people who owned pod machines and people who didn't. And that was, I think, a little bit confusing for people. And so I think niching down to that singular product is you have to be proven, but I have a strong belief that that's going to be massive for us next year. And also then going back to basics on business, I mean, I have a firm belief that all businesses, even if they're all different business models, we're all trying to do the same thing, which is try to be profitable. And I think we have a structure here now that we know where we're going to be profitable. We know how much we can afford to spend in order to acquire a customer, and that's really, really important. And I think then the third piece for me is just it's getting the name out there. So if it's through organic growth and then through paid growth, using influencers, UGC, on my own side, getting on podcasts, talking to yourself and talking about the brand and just creating more content. I as a founder will be involved in a lot of the content because the story of OYL is about me at the beginning, and it's about my life changes, and it's about everything that I went through and how difficult it is to change your life, and how number one, community is so important, but also having these habit hacks that can help keep you on track. I mean, mushroom coffee isn't going to solve all your problems, but it's going to be a part of your journey that's going to help you keep on track. Whenever I have mushroom coffee in the morning, it's the first positive thing that I do, and that kind of sets me on track for the day, and it keeps me kind of focused on keeping myself on the straight and narrow. So those kind of simple enough elements, I think, is what we're going to be focusing on.
Definitely exciting times, and stacking a couple of really, again, getting our foundations as strong as possible and kind of stacking over time will be really important into 2024. But really appreciate the context today. I think it's, again,
I'm excited to share. I'm excited to share. I think if we're going to do this every month, I'm excited to share. I think this coming year is going to be massive. I think we're going to see as a brand and see sales skyrocket with this kind of structure that we have, and having StoreHero there just to guide us through that, and constantly having the finger on the pulse is going to be important.
Definitely. Or sure, look, we're excited too. I think I know people, if listening in over the next couple of months, will get a lot of value about seeing behind the curtain a little bit. And it's, you can definitely learn from the success stories that are already years down the road, but understanding the fundamentals that get people there are often forgotten, or not as front of mind as they are when you're in the middle of the trenches. So thanks, James. I'm
Good.
sure looking forward to chatting more over the next couple of months.
Thanks, Carl.